So again, it's using a quick reference to something in the law to talk about how Christ received punishment for us.
To talk about how Christ received punishment for us.
To talk about how Christ received punishment for us. He metaphorically, it's a metaphor pulling from something in the law for Christ's obedience unto death. But there is no prescription anywhere in the Torah that the Father accepts any human blood, much less a human sacrifice, much less prescription of death by cross, in order for any form of atonement to be made.
And we are here to try and show PSA, again, penal substitutionary atonement. It seemed to me that Sean slightly agrees with PSA. I could be wrong. It seems to me that he definitely affirms that the suffering of Christ, which is relevant to the P part of PSA, the suffering of Christ is relevant to how it is that we are atoned for. Okay. This is the reason why in the debate I brought this very passage up. This is what Christ took. He took on the curse of the law, which is exactly what this says. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us, and then quotes the passage I mentioned. You see, Sean doesn't actually understand my position on PSA, which I laid out uber clear in my perfectly timed 10-minute opening statement. Now, if he would have actually refuted what I said, he'd know why I made mention to Psalm 22 later on in the discussion, because it's absolutely clear that Christ could not have come at any other time than the time that he did. Now, maybe he doesn't know this because he doesn't study messianic prophecies, but it would behoove him to actually do so that he can actually understand a person's position rather than try and straw man them. Now, it's very clear that Christ would not have been put to death under any other circumstances than crucifixion. And the reason why I say it that way is because Sean is on the record saying that the crucifixion isn't anything other than the capital punishment of his time. And if Christ had come now, he'd die by a different means, not according to Scripture, which is heresy, what you're espousing. And this is why I've made the statement, why then could Christ not just live a long life and die at an old age? Why did he have to die? And it seems that Sean also agrees with the fact that there are passages that only Christ could fulfill. And yet, if there are passages, i.e. the suffering passages, that only Christ could fulfill, why would he then superimpose that, i.e. dying on a cross, onto all of humanity as if, well, I don't agree with PSA because it's superimposed all onto humanity, when we know very, very clearly that there are passages that only the guarantor of the covenant, i.e. Christ, by the blood and the water, as he said, etc., is how we gain our access into heaven. Okay. In my opening statement, I laid out a pretty rock solid case that the language that's utilized in Isaiah 53 is judicial language, linking you to the sacrificial system of atonement in the Torah, which makes it uber clear that it can only be done by one person, that is Christ. This is why passages like Romans 3:25, where it very literally says God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood. Notice the reference to the sacrificial system in the Torah. Notice here also the Greek makes reference to a word that is used for the mercy seat. And all of that has to be reinterpreted to Jesus just had to die so he could get to heaven and sacrifice animals. Why then does Sean take a super hyper literal reading of the job of Melchizedek being the job of Levi, except for here and in any part where we humans have to be involved with bringing the offerings to give to Levites or the priest, etc., to then make atonement? Well, I'll tell you, because we can't. They're celestial bulls and goats according to him. And if they're celestial bulls and goats, we cannot bring them. They are not our sacrifices. They are just out there in the ether of that which is the celestial world, according to him. This is problematic and something Sean has yet to deal with. State Melchizedek, according to the way that the word is literally defined, Melchizedek, we do not see that entails the job of Levite being superimposed onto Melchizedek. And that is my biggest issue. If there were something that superimposed the two together, without, again, using passages that are only relevant to Levi and then putting that on Melchizedek, then I would subscribe to his theory. But unfortunately, we don't see that. You have to just kind of eisegete. You have to shove that in there. And again, because of his obedience to the Torah, I understand why he takes these passages to mean literal. But then there are other passages that I bring forward, like first fruits. Christ is the first fruits. He acknowledges this, but then he says it's metaphorical. There are other positions that Sean holds to that will also do the same thing, where he says, yes, it says this, but it's metaphorical. Well, Sean will just say everything's a metaphor where he doesn't agree. But see, I'm a Torah observant Christian as well. And that means the Torah is used in my apologetics to inform my interpretation, which is exactly what I'm showing you on screen. It's a pretty close case. And I think it was in this moment that Sean realized he lost the debate.
Punishment for is he metaphorically, it's a metaphor pulling from something in the law for Christ's obedience unto death.
Yeah, Sean, that's PSA, but why do you get to say everything's metaphorical and not literal when it is in the scripture, which is what I asked here?
Well, then if you get that luxury, then why is it that I can't say Christ ministered when he offered himself, but then the ministering stopped? And then at that point, his job as the king takes over as he...
I would submit to you that one of us is utilizing the sacrificial system in its proper interpretation in light of Christ, and the other one isn't. And I don't think it's me, especially in light of these passages.
Awesome. And Sean, what do you think is the best argument for Courtney's position?
I think Courtney's best argument today was...
I tell you, it's a good question.
I think it may be her pulling on the language of the guilt offering from Isaiah 53, if you know the Torah. But I'll have to stop there because I would immediately want to rebut that. But that's
well,
that's I'll just leave it there. Yeah.
That's how it always is. You're like, this what?
Breaking news, Sean. You're supposed to do the rebutting in the debate on my asham or guilt offering, which you didn't do. That's why you had to do a 4-hour follow-up.
Personally, from the third party sitting out here, just hanging out, I would say the strongest argument I think for Courtney was when she slightly redefined PSA, because then she wasn't under as much of the gun of the baggage of PSA. When she redefined it slightly, it was like right when she did at the beginning, I instantly went, oh, well, that's a little harder to nail down. It's a bit more nuanced. I still disagree, but that was my position.
And with that, we're going to end it here. I won't be doing a back and forth. I'm sure Sean will continue to do that. That's kind of his motif with literally everyone. But this is where it ends for me. Shalom.